It was 1:17 in the morning in Chicago. Rafael Mendoza had been driving for 6 hours. His phone dashboard said he had a 4.97-star rating and had completed 41 trips that week. It didn't say that 3 years earlier he had an office on the 16th floor with his name engraved on a metal plaque. It didn't say that he had built the financial models that helped the tech startup go from $0 to $12 million in funding. It didn't say anything about what it meant to drive a 2019 Honda Civic through the streets of Chicago at 1 in the morning when all you really wanted was to be home, making sure your 8-year-old son was asleep. The ride request came from an address in the financial district. Rafael accepted. He waited outside a modern office building whose upper floors were still lit. The kind of building where people work until hours that don't even have names because failure respects no one's schedule. The lobby doors burst open. A woman stepped out with the walk of someone who had been holding something inside for hours and could no longer contain it. Dark blazer, slightly wrinkled. Loose black hair that had probably started the day perfectly arranged. A phone in one hand. A thick folder under her arm, held tightly as if it were the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly turned liquid. She slid into the back seat without looking up. "Belmont and Clark," she said. The voice of someone who had been talking all day and was completely exhausted by words, but still couldn't stop speaking. "Sure," Rafael replied and started driving. 30 seconds of silence. Then the woman said, not exactly to him, but to the car, to the night, and to no one in particular. 3 months of work. 3 months. And in 40 minutes, they told me the revenue model was too conservative. Rafael didn't respond. He waited. "Too conservative?" she continued, her voice rising slightly. "I built every projection on real market data. Every assumption is documented. And they show up with their PowerPoint spreadsheets and tell me to be more aggressive with growth projections. As if I don't know what happens when a startup projects 400% growth in year 2. Rafael looked in the rearview mirror. The woman stared out the window. Not crying. Too angry to cry. "What happens?" Rafael asked quietly. She looked at him in the mirror. "What?" "When a startup projects 400% growth in year 2, Rafael said. "What happens?" She stopped looking out the window. "Investors get excited for 6 months. You hire people you can't afford. Real growth reaches 180% and looks like a failure even though it's twice the industry average. Then when Series becomes around, nobody wants to fund you because you didn't hit projections that should never have been made in the first place." Silence. "That's exactly what happens," Rafael said. The woman looked at him differently. "How do you know that?" Rafael didn't answer immediately. The traffic light changed from yellow to red. "Because it happened to me." Rafael Javier Mendoza was born in Medellin and raised in Chicago. His father had been a mechanic. His mother cleaned offices for 20 years in the same building where Rafael would eventually have his own office. A coincidence both of them found more poetic than they knew how to express. He studied finance with the kind of focus that comes from knowing exactly how much every semester costs and not wanting to waste a single cent of student loans. He graduated with honors, joined a consulting firm, spent 3 years learning that numbers don't lie, but the people presenting them sometimes do. Then he met Andres Fuentes. Andres was the kind of founder who filled a room without trying. Energy without friction, vision without visible limits, and a unique ability to make any problem seem like an opportunity in disguise. He had an idea for a logistics platform connecting Latin American small businesses with North American distribution networks. The idea was genuinely good. Rafael knew because he had run the numbers 3 times. He joined as CFO with a below-market salary and equity that would be worth something if everything worked out. For 2 years, everything did. Nexo raised its Series A, hired 18 employees, signed pilot contracts with 4 mid-sized companies in Mexico and 2 in Colombia. The product worked. Users stayed. The problem wasn't the product. The problem was Andres. Not because he was dishonest. Rafael always believed Andres truly believed everything he said. The problem was that Andres couldn't say no to an optimistic projection. Every time an investor suggested the numbers could be bigger, Andres adjusted the assumptions upward. Every time Rafael presented the conservative model, Andres arrived afterward with a version that made boardroom smile. Rafael documented it. 3 internal memos in 6 months. Warnings that the Series B projections were unsustainable. Warnings that the burn rate would leave them out of cash in 14 months. Warnings that hiring plans depended on customer growth achievable only in the most optimistic scenario. Andres filed them away. Series B investors arrived with $12 million. Nexo hired 24 more people. 14 months later, exactly as Rafael had projected, the company ran out of money while achieving only 60% of the growth metrics it had promised. It wasn't a dramatic failure. It was the quiet kind. The kind that happens in a boardroom on a Tuesday morning when the CEO explains to 42 employees that the company cannot continue operations, that all options have been explored, that liquidation proceedings were beginning. Rafael drove home that afternoon. Elena was waiting in the kitchen with Mateo in her lap. 5 years old then, eating cereal with the total concentration of a child whose world was still mostly about cereal. She didn't ask what happened. She simply made room for him at the table. 6 months later, Elena was diagnosed with leukemia, the fast-moving kind. A year of hospitals, remissions, carefully measured hope, and the logistical management of a life that still had to function. School, bills, insurance, phone calls made from hospital waiting rooms at 3 in the morning without knowing exactly whom to call. Elena died 18 months after the diagnosis. Mateo was 6. Now, Rafael lived in a 2-bedroom apartment because the school district was good and the rent was affordable enough to make the numbers work if he drove Uber 4 nights a week and did freelance financial consulting the other 3. It wasn't exactly the life plan he had at 28, but it was the plan he had. Mateo was 8 years old, a boy who read math books for fun and asked economic questions during dinner with the seriousness of someone who expected to need the information soon. His backpack had rocket patches he had chosen himself. He slept with the hallway light on, not because he was afraid, but because, as he had once explained with complete seriousness, he sometimes had ideas at 3 in the morning and needed enough light to write them down without waking anyone. Rafael was the kind of father who knew that the left braid always came out slightly worse than the right one. And even though Mateo didn't care, Rafael still tried every time, as if this would finally be the day he got it perfect. On Uber nights, Mateo stayed with Mrs. Esperanza. The third-floor neighbor who met him when they moved in looked at him for about 45 seconds and decided without discussion that she would become his grandmother by choice. She was 72, had raised 4 children, and had absolutely no patience for unnecessary drama. Rafael paid her what he could. She accepted it and then left covered meals outside his door whenever she thought he hadn't eaten properly that week. Like many things in his current life, it was imperfect and completely enough. Isabella Vargas co-founded Lumina at 27. The company did one thing and did it well. It transformed complex educational content into adaptive learning modules that adjusted to each student's pace. The idea itself wasn't new. The execution was. The algorithm built by her technical co-founder, Diego, learned from how students failed, not just how they succeeded. It was the difference between a tutor who repeated the explanation louder and one who understood exactly which part hadn't connected. The first 18 months were what startup books call validation, but what in reality feels like building an airplane while falling. They launched with 3 institutional clients: a school district in Texas, an online certification program in Colombia, a network of adult learning centers in Chicago. Retention numbers were extraordinary. Students using Lumina completed 73% of assigned modules compared to the industry average of 31%. Isabella knew they had something real. Early-stage investors knew it too. The problem was that after their $2 million seed round, every Series A conversation ended in the same collision. Investors wanted user growth projections Isabella considered dishonest. Not impossible. Technically achievable if everything went perfectly. If every target market performed in the top quartile. If no major competitor entered the segment. If the sales team executed flawlessly from day one. Isabella had built her entire career around not lying to numbers. Her father, a public accountant who had spent 30 years in Caracas before emigrating, had taught her one lesson she turned into a life principle. Numbers don't have agendas. People presenting them usually do. So when that night's investors told her projections were too conservative, she didn't change them. She explained why they were what they were. The meeting ended in 40 minutes. Normally they lasted 2 hours. She didn't cry in public. Not because she had consciously decided that. Simply because the space between pain and tears was always filled with things that needed to be done first. So instead, she talked. She texted Diego from the elevator. Didn't work. Call me tomorrow. She called her mother from the lobby. Her mother answered with the specific wisdom of a 60-year-old Venezuelan woman who had rebuilt her life twice in a new country. My daughter, the people who won't fund you today will want to invest once you no longer need them. Then she ordered the Uber. And now she sat in the back seat of a Honda Civic at 1:17 in the morning talking to a driver named Rafael about revenue models. Because he had asked the right question. How do you know that? And he had replied with 4 words no ordinary driver would have said. Because it happened to me. The GPS said they were 9 minutes away from Belmont and Clark. Rafael saw it and took the longer route. He said nothing about it. Rafael Mendoza, he said, former CFO. Now an Uber driver and freelance consultant on Tuesdays and Thursdays. What kind of consulting? Financial modeling for early-stage startups. Projection analysis. Fundraising preparation. He paused. Basically, I help founders avoid the mistakes I made. Isabella thought about that. Then why don't you have full-time corporate clients with your background? I have some, Rafael said. But large projects require availability that doesn't work with picking Mateo up from school. No complaint in his voice. Just logistics. I'd rather earn less and be available. Isabella looked down at her hands. She thought of her father, the accountant from Caracas who rebuilt his career from scratch in Miami at 52, without ever complaining about what he'd lost. Tell me what I'm doing wrong, she said. I don't know if you're doing anything wrong, Rafael replied. I only know one fragment of the story. 4 years as a CFO, and now consulting for startups. You know more than I do about pitching investors, about presenting conservative models to investors who want aggressive growth projections. Yes. He paused. That's a specific problem. It has a specific solution. Tell me. Rafael drove in silence for a few seconds. What is Lumina worth if the conservative projections are correct? He asked. 40 to 60 million in 5 years if we maintain current retention ratios and expand into 3 additional institutional markets. And if the aggressive projections are correct, it could reach 150 million. But we'd have to hire 3 times faster than we can properly integrate people, enter markets before gathering enough data from existing ones, and assume no major competitor enters the segment within the next 18 months. What's the real probability of that scenario? 25%, 30 at most. So you have a product with a 70% chance of becoming a $40 million company and a 30% chance of becoming a $150 million company. Yes. Then this isn't a projection problem, Rafael said. It's an investor problem. You're talking to the wrong kind of fund. Isabella became completely still. Explain. Traditional venture capital funds need a few investments to return 100 times their money for the fund to work, Rafael said. To them, a company that will probably reach 40 million isn't very interesting, even if it's a great business. They need the $150 million outcome, even if it's only a 30% possibility. Slowly, Isabella nodded. I know that. Do you? Rafael asked. Or do you know it and keep pitching those funds anyway, hoping one of them will think differently? The silence that followed had a very specific quality. The second one, she admitted. Then Lumina isn't a traditional venture capital company, Rafael said. It's an educational impact company with extraordinary retention metrics and diversified revenue streams. That's exactly what impact funds, educational foundations, and family offices looking for sustainable long-term returns are searching for. Impact funds write smaller checks. They write smaller checks and expect growth that's compatible with your actual business model, which means you can grow at the speed your data supports hire at a sustainable pace, and reach Series B with the metrics you promised instead of the ones you didn't. Isabella stared out the window. The car passed a dark park. Leafless November trees. Streetlights casting long shadows across wet pavement. "Who should I talk to?" she asked. "I know 3 impact funds in Chicago," Rafael replied, "and 2 family offices that have invested in Latin American education companies over the past 5 years." He paused. "But that depends on whether you'd like to continue this conversation somewhere other than an Uber at 1 in the morning." She looked at him in the mirror. "How much do you charge? For an initial consultation?" "Nothing. And after that, if you think I can help, then we discuss terms." "Why free the first time?" A brief silence. "Because nobody gave me a free consultation when I needed one." The GPS announced their arrival at Belmont and Clark. Rafael pulled up in front of a 4-story red brick apartment building. The lobby lights were on. The street was quiet. Isabella didn't move. "When can you meet?" she asked. "Tuesdays or Thursdays during the day, or in an Uber between midnight and 2 in the morning if you're comfortable with unconventional circumstances." "Tuesday. Where?" "There's a coffee shop on Milwaukee Avenue with good lighting and music that's quiet enough for thinking. 10 in the morning. I have 2 hours before I pick up Mateo from an after-school activity." Isabella opened the Uber app. 5 stars. Then she typed, "Best conversation I've had in months. Exceptionally competent driver in every sense." She left a $50 tip. Then she looked up. "What's the name of the cafe?" "La Paloma. Tuesday at 10. Tuesday at 10. She opened the door, then stopped. "Why did you take the longer route?" Rafael didn't answer immediately. The GPS said 9 minutes when we passed State Street. "We got here in 17. A pause. "Because the conversation wasn't finished." She nodded. Then she stepped out. Rafael waited until she entered the building. It was 1:34 a.m. He drove home. There was a good chance Mateo had left another note on the kitchen table. He had. It read, "Dad, can a number be infinite in 2 directions at the same time? Urgent question. M." Rafael read it twice. Then he checked that Mateo was covered with his blanket and went to bed. La Paloma Cafe was exactly as Rafael had described. Good light. No intrusive music. The smell of real coffee and fresh bread. The kind of place where people could think. Isabella arrived precisely at 10. Rafael was already there with black coffee and an open notebook. No laptop. Just graph paper filled with small, organized handwriting. They greeted each other with the slight awkwardness of 2 people who had shared an intimate conversation in a strange setting and were now meeting in a normal one. "How's Mateo?" Isabella asked. Rafael looked mildly surprised. "Good." This morning he asked whether infinite numbers can extend in 2 directions simultaneously. "Can they?" "Yes. They're called transfinite numbers. George Cantor described them in the 19th century. He smiled. "I have an 8-year-old who researches transfinite numbers." She sat down. "So where do we start?" "At the beginning. Tell me the story of Lumina from day 1. For 45 minutes, Isabella talked. Not like a founder giving a pitch. Like someone who had lived every decision. The original idea. The first customers. Diego's algorithm. The retention numbers. The markets they hadn't entered yet. The reasons investors kept saying maybe, but not yes. Rafael listened. Took notes. Didn't interrupt. When she finished, he asked only 4 questions. One answer immediately caught his attention. "We've never lost an institutional customer." Rafael looked up. "Never. 0 institutional churn in 18 months. He underlined something twice. "That's the most important number in your entire company." Isabella blinked. "It's on slide 8. It should be on slide 2. "Why?" "Because educational impact funds have seen thousands of adaptive learning platforms with great acquisition numbers and terrible retention. Your problem isn't getting customers. It's keeping them. And you've already solved that. For 2 hours they worked. Not changing the business. Changing the story. The order of the story. Which number appeared first? Which appeared last? What question slide 3 should create so slide 4 could answer it before investors asked?" 11:45. Rafael closed the notebook. "I have to pick up Mateo." Isabella nodded. "You mentioned impact funds. 3 in Chicago. one in New York with a Latin American fund. He paused. I know one of the Chicago partners personally. Would you introduce Lumina? If the revised deck is ready, and if I think it's strong enough after reviewing it, yes. She nodded. How long? A week if you send me everything today. You'll have it today. She paused. What email should I use? Rafael tore a page from the notebook and slid it across the table. She read it. Rafael Mendoza, CFO, Nexo Technologies, 2017 to 2020. The email is the same one I used back then, he said. I know why, Isabella replied. Why? Because people don't change the email address of the version of themselves that still has something left to resolve. For a moment, Rafael simply looked at her, then stood. The deck by Thursday. And Rafael, yes. Thank you. You don't need to thank me yet. You've already done more than you realize. The files arrived that same afternoon. Rafael opened them after Mateo had gone to bed. The house was silent except for the refrigerator and distant traffic. The Lumina deck was technically excellent, strategically wrong, not because of the numbers. The numbers were honest. The problem was the order, the story. It opened with the total addressable market, $890 billion, a number venture capitalists loved. Impact investors didn't care. Impact investors invested in evidence, not market size. Rafael spent 3 hours reorganizing the narrative. The first slide became a simple fact. Out of every 10 students who start an online learning module, only 3 finish. At Lumina, 7 finish. That was slide 1. Slide 2 was the zero institutional churn rate. Slide 3 asked, why? The next 8 slides answer that question. The market size slide moved to number 12. Projections moved to 13. Still conservative, still honest, still documented. And beneath them, Rafael added a note. These projections are built on the documented base case scenario. An optimistic scenario exists and is available. We present it last because we believe educational impact investors deserve models that are honest first and ambitious second. He rewrote that sentence 3 times before keeping it. It might lose the wrong investor. It might attract the right one. At 1:43 a.m., he sent the revised deck to Isabella. A few minutes later, she replied, the sentence stays. Everything stays. Thank you. Then another message. How's Mateo? Rafael smiled. Sleeping. Left another note about transfinite numbers. Did he understand them? Not only did he understand them, he found an application in set theory I hadn't considered. He's 8. I know. A long pause. Then, why do you help strangers you meet in an Uber at 1 in the morning? Rafael stared at the screen, then replied, because when Nexo collapsed, I needed someone to tell me exactly what I told you. Nobody did. Another pause. And because people tell the truth in Ubers at 1 a.m. in ways they never do in boardrooms. And truth is the only place you can build something that lasts. Andres Torres was 51. He had spent 12 years running Semilla Impact Fund. He was the kind of investor who read every slide before a meeting and arrived with questions about assumptions rather than logos. Rafael called him Thursday morning. The call lasted 23 minutes. He described Lumina without exaggeration. The retention numbers, the zero churn, Diego's algorithm. Then he described Isabella. Not her resume, not her credentials. Something more important. She's the kind of founder who built conservative projections while every investor told her to make them more aggressive, Rafael said. And she defended them with data instead of changing them to win the room. Silence. Then Andres asked, when can I meet her? The meeting happened the following Tuesday. Andres read the deck carefully. When he reached slide 13, he stopped. Read Rafael's note. Then read it again. Who wrote this? Isabella thought for exactly 1 second. An Uber driver who turned out to be the most honest CFO I've ever met. Andres looked at her, then laughed. A real laugh. Not a boardroom laugh. A genuine one. We're going to do business. Semilla invested $3 million. It wasn't the biggest check Isabella had imagined when raising Series A. It was the right check, from the right investor, with the right expectations, at the right pace. When Diego read the term sheet, he read it 3 times. Where did you find these people? In an Uber. He stared. At 1 in the morning, Diego decided not to ask any further questions. Rafael learned about the investment through a text message. We signed yesterday. Samila closed. Thank you. Then another message. Do you still drive Uber on Tuesdays? Thursdays too. Available for coffee that isn't inside an Uber? Rafael looked at the screen. Mateo sat at the kitchen table doing math homework with the concentration of someone training for more important things. La Paloma. Tuesday at 10. Tuesday at 10. That night, Rafael sat alone in the kitchen. Coffee beside him. Notebook open. He thought about Elena. About how she always said the most important work anyone could do was using what they had learned through pain to help someone else avoid learning it the same way. He thought about Nexo, the 3 ignored memos, the 42 employees in that boardroom. He thought about Isabella in the back seat at 1:17 a.m., talking to the night about revenue models nobody wanted to hear. Then he closed the notebook. He went to Mateo's room. His son slept beneath the hallway light. Rocket backpack beside the bed. Ready for tomorrow. Always ready for tomorrow. There was a folded note on the pillow. Rafael opened it. In Mateo's neat handwriting. Dad, I researched transfinite numbers. Cantor was rejected by all the mathematicians of his time. He said it didn't matter because he knew he was right. Do you know when you're right too? M. Rafael folded the note, placed it in the pocket of his brown leather jacket. Then he turned off the hallway light for a moment so Mateo could see the stars if he woke up, and turned it back on. He went to sleep thinking that Cantor had been right, and that sometimes all truth needs is the kind of conversation that happens when someone asks the right question at 1:17 in the morning in Chicago. Some conversations happen in places that don't seem important, a back seat, a neighborhood cafe, a kitchen at midnight, and quietly rearrange everything that comes afterward. Not because someone said something brilliant, but because someone was willing to listen with the full attention of a person who understands the value of what is being said. Rafael Mendoza didn't save Lumina. Isabella Vargas already had everything Lumina needed. He simply changed the order in which she presented it. Sometimes, that's exactly enough.